cat's out of the bag. This has started.
It's the controversial sporting competition where drug cheats aren't only allowed, they're the stars.
This is Nobel Prize winning science. He didn't just break a world record, he broke the most important record in swimming.
Today we stop watching the clock and we start rewinding it. Today we don't just launch a sporting event, we launch the next era of human evolution.
If the Olympics no longer are the ultimate avenue of human competition, it means that the enhanced games are.
Doping Olympics, as it's been dubbed, aims to rival professional athletics, but with a twist. You can basically take whatever you like.
Drugs allow athletes to run faster and jump higher and swim faster.
The World Anti-Doping Agency have come down pretty hard on you. In breach of criminal laws, a catastrophic influence on the next generation. There is no rules or values.
If you created the Olympics today in the modern world, it would not look like anything it is now. You would not create an undemocratic, unaccountable, bloated, corrupt system that benefits bureaucrats, not athletes. So far in human history, there have been 9 ages. What is the next age of mankind?
Hello and welcome back to Axler Bio. Today we're joined by Aron D'Souza, an Oxford-trained lawyer and the president of Enhanced Games. He has previously helped Peter Thiel take down Gawker Media, and now he's taking aim at the Olympics, challenging the status quo with a vision for a superhuman enhanced future. So, Aron, welcome. One of the Enhanced Games swimmers just broke a world record. Congratulations. You must be super ecstatic. So, how do you feel right now?
He didn't just break a world record, he broke the most important record in swimming, the 50 freestyle. It's the ultimate avenue of human competition in the pool. It's one length. It's what every child wants to do. They jump into one side and they ask, how quickly can I get to the other? And why this is important is because it shows the potential of the enhanced games. Christian Kolomev was 31 years old when he broke the record, which is arguably at least 10 years past his prime as a swimmer. So it becomes proof that the same drugs allow athletes to run faster and jump higher and swim faster will also allow us to all be younger and stronger for longer.
So there's a lot that I want to unpack there already. But first of all, you said it's not any world record, it's the most important one in the swimming category. But beyond that, why does this matter? Like, what is the bigger picture here? And why is this an important milestone?
It's an important milestone because sports leagues are very durable. So no one watches F2, everyone watches F1. No one watches minor league baseball, everyone wants to watch major league baseball. Because there's something deeply rooted in us as human beings to want to see the very best of human performance. And, if the Olympics no longer are the ultimate avenue of human competition, it means that the enhanced games are. And this is why World Aquatics has become very aggressive. They've banned anyone who supports scientific advancement from any World Aquatics events and the Olympics. So they've become unabashed Luddites, and it shows the difference, right? We believe in science, we believe in technology, we believe in the future, and the old legacy aristocratic sports establishment is stuck in the past and is anti-science.
I definitely want to double click on that. First of all, before we go there, did you expect the world record to be broken this early, or was this kind of a surprise?
No, I did not expect it to be broken this early. It was something that had really, thought we would take years to break our first world records. But the fact that it happened so quickly and Christian Kolomev was only enhanced for 3 weeks leading up to his world record. So this gives me the confidence that at the first enhanced games, we're not just going to break more world records, we're going to break all the world records. And this is very threatening for the outdated anti-science Olympic movement, because if we have all the records in the pool, we have Usain Bolt's 100-meter world record, the mile and the marathon, then what do they have? They have an old, slow, outdated, costly sporting event, and we have the ultimate avenue of human competition.
So let's double click on that now. As you said, both World Aquatics and the World Anti-Doping Agency have come down pretty hard on you. I've got a couple of quotes here that I've seen from some of the statements that were published by WADA, and it's pretty crazy. They said, in breach of criminal laws, a catastrophic influence on the next generation, there is no rules or values. So what was really going on here?
Well, this is a tired outdated, broken system responding how they always do. It's like how the taxi cabs responded to Uber, or, rent-seeking landlords responded to Airbnb. This is what consumers want. This is what science and technology and human advancement needs. And these people are trying to hold on to their broken, corrupt system. And I would note the president of World Aquatics is currently under criminal investigation in his home country of Kuwait, and has been investigated by the FBI multiple times for taking multi-million-dollar bribes for awarding major sporting events to cities. We're competing against literally a criminal cartel, and we will fight.
Well, speaking of hypocrisy, but let's unpack that a little bit more. So, other than the personal behavior of the president of World Aquatics, how is the establishment outdated, and how is it immoral, and how are you basically attempting to do better than that?
Well, 44% of elite athletes, according to research commissioned by the World Anti-Doping Agency and the International Olympic Committee, conducted by researchers from Harvard University, admit to doping. 44%. Yet only 1% get caught. And time again, we've seen doping scandals, which have been orchestrated by the top officials of the Olympic movement, such as the 23 Chinese swimmers just before last Paris Olympics who were found using a banned heart medication, and it's all swept under the rug, right? When 44% of your athletes are doping and only 1% are getting caught, you have a serious structural problem. And so instead of hiding this and not admitting to the truth, let's bring science out into the open. And in another vein, the Olympics are some of the most costly events in human history. So you only need to look at the Athens 2004 Olympics or the Rio 2016 Olympics, where a dozen stadiums were built and they were thrown away after 2 weeks, and they literally led to the bankruptcy of nations. Now, the 2008 financial crisis was directly attributable to the Greek debt crisis, which was caused by hosting the 2004 Athens Olympics. So the world went bankrupt because Greece decided to host an Olympic Games. Not the exception, it's the rule. And they are very threatened by the fact that we have a superior business model. We don't need to build dozens of stadiums and throw them away. We are gaining traction very, very quickly.
Fair enough. So tell us a little bit more about the traction, actually. How did it all begin? When did you start, and how did you get to where you are right now?
Well, the idea of the enhanced games first came to me more than 20 years ago when I read a paper by Professor Julian Savulescu from Oxford University, who argued for an enhanced Olympic Games, almost arguing that there's a moral imperative to include science in sport. Obviously, I didn't act on it back then. I wish I did. And we gained traction after I announced the concept in June of 2023. Soon after that, hours after that, Balaji Srinivasan, the notable angel investor and former CTO of Coinbase, invested in the company. He DM'd me on Twitter and sent me a term sheet via DM, hours after we launched. And then, we've just gone from strength to strength since then. We've recruited some of the best investors in the world, including Peter Thiel, Donald Trump Jr., support from, the most powerful political figures in the world. And now our first host event in Las Vegas in Memorial Day 2026.
Well, that sounds pretty impressive. And according to some statements I've seen online, you have raised 300 million, or you were raising 300 million. Is that correct?
We have raised many, many millions of dollars. We don't talk about our financials, but it's been a very successful round of fundraising, I'll admit.
That's great to hear. And you mentioned some pretty famous names there. And based on this and based on your career so far as well, you are definitely doing a really good job surrounding yourself with very influential, very smart, and very famous people. What was your secret? How do you achieve that?
That's a great question. Whenever I meet someone important, or I never ask them, what can they do for me? I asked them, what can I do for them? And when I met Peter Thiel, I asked him, I was 24 years old. I was a first-year law student at Oxford University. And I asked him, what is your greatest problem? And what can I do to help you solve it? And that's the attitude that I brought to all of my interactions in life. And, I sit here now at the helm of a quite notable and globally recognized organization. I get, sometimes up to 100 people a day asking for jobs. And I find it surprising. All of them talk about what they need, right? They say, I need a job because I need to pay my rent, or living in New York is hard. They never begin by saying, I have these special skills and I can help you succeed. And that would be a very different message. And so that's the advice I would give. Always focus on what problems you can solve for other people, not how other people can solve your problems.
Sounds like very sound advice. And so speaking of which, speaking of problem solving, so we introduced briefly what Enhanced Games is about, but what I'm really curious to hear is the bigger picture of like, what are you really trying to achieve here? Is it about accelerating science, like you said? Is it about creating the best possible spectacle on the planet? Is it about selling substances? I think that has been also announced. Is it about all of the above? Like, what's the really bigger picture here?
The stated goal of the Enhanced Games is to create superhumanity. And, I love the progress that has been made in the biotechnology sector, in the longevity sector in the last few decades. However, the progress is so incremental that it never feels like there's a Sputnik moment, right? And so we need a Sputnik moment for science that says, truly, we are moving out of the information age and into the enhanced age, an age where technology physically enhances humanity. It enhances the human experience, and it enhances the human condition. And I believe that's what the games can do for the world. Imagine a world where, a 40-year-old can run faster than Usain Bolt. Imagine a world where a 65-year-old can run a sub 10-second 100-meter. These are the kind of events that will culturally change us. I think of the greatest problem that is faced by the Western democracies is an aging population. We have picked 65 as an arbitrary age of retirement. It was picked by Napoleon, actually. And when he picked it, the average person didn't even get to retirement. Now, almost everyone does, and they're retired for 20 or 30 years. So why should 65, the age of retirement, when lifespans and health spans have increased so dramatically? Well, it's a very difficult political problem to solve, but it's a cultural problem that I think the Enhanced Games can solve. Imagine a 65-year-old running a 10-second 100-meter. It would invite us to introspect on how we can fundamentally change our society to say that, 65 isn't the end of adult life and the beginning of decline. It's just another arbitrary date.
I love the sound of that, and entering the enhanced era and humanity 2.0. That's something we at BiohackerDAO feel quite strongly about. It's definitely not discussed quite enough. And you just mentioned the Sputnik moment, and I think that's very interesting, and I would love to expand on this. So actually, what would be your Sputnik moment for the Enhanced Games? Is it when, like you said, a 65-year-old runs sub 10 seconds, or what would it be?
Well, the beauty about the structure of the Enhanced Games is that there will be multiple Sputnik moments. So there will be the first time we break a world record. We've already done that with Christian Kolomev and the 50 freestyle. Then it will be when we break, I think the most important world record, which is Usain Bolt's 100. And then it's when increasingly older individuals can perform at levels beyond the natural threshold, because we know what the natural threshold is. It's 9.5 seconds in a 100-meter. It's 21 seconds in a 50 free in the pool, and we can see increasingly older individuals perform at that level, and that's going to really inspire the world.
It sounds great. I'm all for it. So talking about the cultural change that you mentioned, you're trying to bring about. So we briefly mentioned the reaction of the establishment, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency, the World Aquatics, obviously negative for self-interested reasons. What has the reaction of the wider public, like, the common man, has been so far to the world record and to everything that they've done?
Oh, it's been extraordinarily positive. We have gone viral more times than I can count. And, we have such intense interest in what we do because the Olympic system is unjustifiable. If you created the Olympics today in the modern world, it would not look like anything it is now. You would not create an undemocratic, unaccountable, bloated, corrupt system that benefits bureaucrats, not athletes. And the Enhanced Games is not just about science, it's also about money. The average Olympian in the United States only earns about $30,000 a year. Christian Golomev, in his entire career, over 10 years, only earned about $200,000. And now we are paying $1 million for a world record. It's life-changing for these athletes. And I believe that excellence deserves to be rewarded. The finest examples of our species are impoverished, not because they are competing in niche sports. It's because the bureaucrats are against compensation. And what World Aquatics did is, consistent with a pattern of behavior designed to impoverish swimmers and retain a tired old monopoly that is financially oppressive.
I can imagine how Christian feels after coming back, what was it, 4 years out of retirement and breaking the world record and getting $1 million. He must be pretty ecstatic about this.
Yeah, going from being a good international swimmer to the best in human history. Think about this. Billions of people swim. Billions of hours have been spent attempting to swim the length of a pool. And Christian Golomev has done this faster than anyone in the totality of human history. That's a pretty amazing achievement. This is something that almost every human being will attempt at some point in their life. They will get into a pool and try and get to the other side. And he has done this faster than anyone else and broken a world record that has stood for 16 years. I think it's hard to even estimate the cultural impact of this. I think we might look back at this in 100 years and say Christian Golomev was the equivalent of Yuri Gagarin, the first man going to space. Someone who is truly heroic and taking great personal risk for himself in the quest of advancing the human species.
A great personal risk and a great reputational risk, I suppose, and going against the grain of the whole establishment that's against you. That must have a quite high emotional toll on someone, I would imagine. But yeah, I guess it will be all worth it in the long run.
Yeah, and I think everyone can see it, right? At the end of the day, enhanced athletes are going to be faster, stronger, have longer career longevity than natural athletes. And I think the same dynamic will happen as between amateurs and professionals. So from 1896 until 1992, amateur athletes were the moral touchstone of Olympic sport, and it was viewed as cheating or undermining the spirit of sport to take even $1 in compensation. Excuse me, to even take $1 in compensation for participating in sport. It was ungentlemanly, it was unethical. And by 1992, it was pretty obvious that professional athletes were just a lot better. They were a lot more interesting and they were faster than amateur athletes. And now we don't even care about amateurism. It doesn't exist. And the same is going to happen in the transition from amateur to professional, natural to enhanced.
What did it take to make that original transition from amateur to professional? Was it just people realizing that these people perform better and it's more interesting to watch, or was it something else?
I think it was actually basketball which proved this. So 1992 Barcelona Olympics was the first time professional basketball players were allowed to play, and that meant NBA players. So Olympic basketball went from a bunch of people no one had ever heard of, that no one was interested in watching, to the dream team, Michael Jordan et al. And that was the principal, television viewership of the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, and saved the Olympic movement in so many ways. And then they just fully gave up on amateurism. They just threw it out. It doesn't even exist anymore. It's not even a concept. No one even talks about it. And, World Athletics used to be called the Amateur Athletics Union, right? And so many of these sporting bodies were called, had amateur in their actual name, and now this doesn't even exist. So I think the farce, the legal fiction of natural sport, everyone will admit it's over, right? It's one of these things that social change happens quicker now than ever before. It took decades to erode amateur sport, and it will take days to erode natural sport.
Do you think the same thing will happen to the current Olympics as what has happened to amateur sport, or are they going to continue coexist side by side with the enhanced games?
I don't think an organization that is so poorly run, that has such a fragile business model, will survive. Why will cities pay tens of billions of dollars to host an event that is not the fastest in the world? Why will broadcasters pay billions of dollars to show an event that doesn't have the world records, that isn't the ultimate avenue of human competition? Because ultimately, the Olympic ethos, going all the way back to ancient Greece, was the ultimate avenue of human competition. The best athletes from the whole Greek diaspora went to Olympia to compete and to show who was the best. But that was the whole idea of the Olympic Games. And if they are not the best, it's, NBC is not going to pay billions of dollars to broadcast it. It's as simple as that. Okay, yes, they have contracts that go out to the LA 28 and, Brisbane 32 Olympics, but they don't have a host city for the 36 games. The broadcast deals will change radically, and they have a very, very high cost structure. And so I think, okay, yes, taxi cabs still exist, but I haven't taken a taxi in decades, and I would never do it. It's unsafe, right? It's much safer and more efficient to take an Uber. Maybe people still want to take taxis, right? Maybe they exist for a while in certain cities and certain places, but their place in the world is increasingly irrelevant in an age of Uber.
I have taken taxis, but only in cities where Uber wasn't available.
Yeah, and that's the legacy protections of a structural monopoly. However, the Olympics are a global organization, right, and requires global buy-in. And so as soon as, world records are being broken, they're world records, I don't think there's going to be the same kind of buy-in, and they have a very high cost structure. So, the dynamics will change very significantly, and I think very quickly. And that's why they're so afraid. And that's why they are pushing this, aggressive anti-science illegal agenda.
So the sport establishment is against you, the people are with you. How about the media? How has it been received or covered by the existing media?
I think it's been received very positively. It's a bold, thought-provoking initiative. Journalists always tell me that when they write articles about the enhanced games, they go viral. They're very popular. So journalists love writing about us. And, when you look at just the headline of this, steroids free-for-all, or the steroid Olympics, that is negative, right? But when individuals and when journalists spend the time to really understand what we're doing, the rigorous scientific project that underpins this, the athlete compensation, the fair deal for host cities, they come around very, very quickly, and they're extremely supportive. We were on the cover of The Economist magazine. I was very honored that Time magazine put me on their list of the top 100 figures in global health. I'm not even an MD, and I'm being honored alongside, the Director General of the World Health Organization, and media has realized that, we have made and we will continue to make a very important contribution to accelerating science.
Is this controversy actually something that's helping you guys? Is that part of the strategy?
Well, I would say it's not about being controversial. It's about being thought-provoking. It's good to have debate. It's good to exist, in the town square, in the marketplace of ideas, and to challenge legacy institutions. Just because something has been there for 100 years doesn't mean it will be there for even another decade. We live in an era where traditional institutions should always be questioned. And our top political leaders in the world, whether it's Donald Trump in the United States or, Reform in Britain, or AfD in Germany, are built on the premise of challenging legacy institutions.
You're definitely tapping into the zeitgeist here right now, as you said, challenging legacy institutions and rebuilding a lot of those things from scratch. Has it been intentional on your side in terms of timing and trying to do this right now?
I'd like to say that in late 2022, when I first conceptualized this, that I, predicted the whole political shifts of the world, but I did not. But they've been very beneficial to us. And ultimately, why is all this happening now? It's because with social media, new communities can form faster than ever before in human history on a global scale. And so, even 20 years ago, I don't think the enhanced games would have been possible because we would not have been able to find supporters. We would have not been able to find each other to have this conversation. There were traditional gatekeepers in the legacy media, in the political establishment, in the sports establishment. And now those gatekeepers don't exist, right? We can build global communities quickly, virtually instantaneously at virtually no cost, and spread a message that goes viral very, very quickly that it could not have happened even a generation ago.
That is true. You only have to find the first few people that are really excited and really strongly advocating for you, and the message spreads.
Yeah, and it's simple. The structure of revolutions is always the same. The hardest part about any revolution is finding your first followers. Like the very small handful of the first individuals who are willing to risk their reputation, their livelihoods, and sometimes their lives for the cause of justice, freedom, and human progress. And, I'm so proud of the, group of people who have come together to bring the enhanced games into reality. And the proof is in the pudding. We've been able to hire some of the best people in the world. They've left the U.S. Olympic Committee, Nike, and Red Bull. We've recruited some of the best athletes in the world. We have some of the best venues in the world, and we have, the top level political support. So it becomes, in my opinion, almost fait accompli to achieve what we're doing. And, one of my very first employees printed out a sign and put it up in our little office in London when we started. And he said, "The enhanced movement is inevitable. The cat's out of the bag. This has started. The business model is out there. The intellectual framework is out there. And even if I got hit by a bus crossing the street here in New York City this afternoon, the enhanced movement will succeed because human progress never stops."
Well, you have definitely achieved a lot in a very short amount of time. So well done on that. And you have mentioned the revolution, you've mentioned the enhanced movement, you have mentioned about entering the era of enhanced humanity. We talked about that briefly, but I would like to dig a little bit deeper. So what does the future, what does humanity, what does culture look like on the other side of the revolution? You did mention living longer and being healthier. Is that most of what it is, or what are the other implications that you foresee?
Well, every age of mankind is governed by very simple ideas. And they're not ideas generated by think tanks and politicians. They're ideas generally developed by philosophers and driven by culture. And so far in human history, there have been 9 ages. Let me see if I can get these right. There was the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Middle Ages, the Age of Enlightenment, the Age of Industrialization. And in the 20th century, we've had the atomic, space, and information ages. To say that we presently live in the information age sounds kind of outdated. It's very like Bill Gates' 1980s, the information superhighway, a PC on every desk. And then the overarching question, I think, is then what is the next age of mankind? And I think there are only 2 options. There's the artificial intelligence age, and there's the enhanced age. The artificial age, in my mind, means that the machines have won, that humans become a subordinate species to the machines, and then eventually will be eliminated. It's a dystopian version of the future that puts technology at the center. The enhanced age is the opposite. It's where technology enhances the human experience, the human condition. The sole purpose of technology is to enhance humanity. And that means on a physical level, what we're doing at the enhanced games. It means on a cultural level, a spiritual level, a mental level. And just as during the atomic age, atomic policy was the major driver of public policy discourses. The space age, space policy dictated everything in Washington and in Moscow. And I think in the enhanced age, this becomes a lens by which all public policy measures can be judged. Are we encouraging technologies? Are we incubating technology so that it will enhance the human experience?
So in terms of the 2 previous eras that you mentioned, the atomic age and the space age, I think there have always been 2 drivers. One of them was positive scientific breakthroughs. All of this becomes now possible. There is also a more negative driver, maybe, or competitive driver. We have to beat the Soviet Union, or we have to beat someone else to a certain technology. So are you saying it's going to be a similar scenario right now in terms of us having to compete or remain relevant in the age of AI? And that's going to be one of the big triggers for policymakers and people to embrace this?
Yes, well, I think it's actually a multivariant competition. So one is a competition between man and machine. And so we need to physically upgrade the humans to compete with the machines, right? Then there's also the competition between nations and communities. So right now there's a tally of gold medals at the Olympic Games, and countries like the United States, Australia, the United Kingdom do very well in this. Even very populous countries like India do very poorly, and this is somehow a measure of the strength of a society. But at the enhanced games, that medal tally will be very different because some countries which are science first, that have a pro technology framework, will win more medals, right? The United States will win a lot of medals. Italy, which has a very progressive human enhancement framework, will win a lot of medals. Australia, which is filled with anti-technology Luddites, will win no medals. And for a country like Australia, I'm Australian, to go from winning lots of gold medals at the Olympics to none at the enhanced games will force a reckoning in public policy about their scientific prowess as a nation. They think of themselves as a very R&D driven nation, but their human enhancement framework is so backwards that they will win no gold medals.
Do you think, as a society as a whole, we have become a bit too much anti-science, anti-progress?
Yeah, I think we don't dream large enough, right? There's this sort of famous Peter Thiel line: "We wanted flying cars, and we got 140 characters." And I admired leaders like Elon or Sam, who have articulated a compelling notion, compelling vision of what humanity can be. Elon to make humans interplanetary, Sam to make artificial general intelligence. We're going in the same pathway. Our goal is to enhance all of humanity, to upgrade humanity so that we all have the opportunity to live enhanced and become superhuman.
So, talking about becoming superhuman, you mentioned physical enhancement, you mentioned other types of enhancement. Is the end vision really kind of like an X-Men scenario? We just have all sorts of different superpowers that we can't imagine yet, and maybe I can pick and choose which powers I download, or how do you envision this?
Yeah, so I've made a study of how long science fiction takes to become scientific reality. So the first work of science fiction was Jules Verne's A Journey to the Moon, was written in 1859. And it's a fascinating book for anyone interested in scientific progress, because it was about launching men in a capsule into space using a gun, like a giant cannon. And he actually went through all the calculations and everything, and it was actually very, very intelligently thought out. It took just 110 years to go from absolute science fiction to scientific reality. HAL 9000 to Alexa is about 50 years. From, the robot vacuum cleaner and the Jetsons to a Roomba took about 50 years. And, the X-Men comic books are about 50 years old now, right? And we are the first people who are making a concerted effort in a very tangible way to make superhumans. And yes, I want to live in a world where I can have superpowers. Why not? Right? I want to live in a world where aging is a disease that we can treat, cure, and eventually solve. What that begins with is an intention. I think that, my theory of social change is very simple. Change only happens when someone puts a suit on and goes to work every day to try and solve a problem. And until, Balaji and Peter and Christian and others funded the enhanced games, there was no one trying to make superhumanity a reality. There was no one who's made it their job, full-time job, to make human enhancement normalized. And we have a great and very scalable business model, global distribution platform. And so I think it's very, very possible. Like what could happen if we could spend $1 trillion on R&D in human enhancement? Well, in the last 20 years, there have only been about $10 million in public funding for any kind of human enhancement research. So you might say $1 trillion is a lot of money, but the GLP-1 drugs have added $1 trillion to the market capitalization of Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. And I think the next great wonder drug will be a human enhancement drug, because Ozempic is one. It's prescribed off-label 83% of the time. And so, instead of spending $3,500 a year to go to Equinox Gym, will people spend, the same or not more money to be healthier and stronger by taking a pill or an injection? I think that's absolutely likely, and particularly here in the United States. And that's going to create a multi-trillion-dollar market for the next generation of human enhancement products.
I would love to see that happen. And when you talk about it, definitely peptides come to mind as something that's being discussed quite a lot right now in the biohacking community. And it's kind of I guess it's in the legally gray area right now. People are buying it for research purposes online. And it just shows how much appetite there is to do even like very kind of basic types of enhancements if you can.
Yeah. And according to our research, 85% of American men want to use performance enhancements if they're safe, doctor prescribed, and used by champion athletes. And why is it that there has been no research in performance enhancements? Because they can't be used for their core cause. So it's been a negative feedback cycle. There's no R&D because they can't be used in the core situation, which is in sports. So then there's no market, and then there's no research, and there's no improvement. And that's why Usain Bolt's world record has been standing for 16 years. The mile world record is now 25 years old, right? There's been no progress in sport for 25 years, right? If that were the case in telephones or social media or air travel, we would find that to be very, very disappointing. In contrast, the enhanced games, we break world records. That allows us to market and sell more drugs. That allows us to pay athletes more money. That allows us to do more R&D, that allows us to break more world records, right? And becomes a positive feedback cycle until we are literally at sort of the X-Men, transhumanist future.
I like the sound of that, and I like how you have done the math on it takes 50 years from sci-fi to science reality. I wonder though, when it comes to human enhancement specifically, whenever I have a conversation with like an average person about this, not always, but often their reaction is like, we shouldn't be changing what makes us human. There seems to be a much stronger reaction often than against other technology. And I personally think it's probably for religious reasons, even if the people are not explicitly religious, there is still this kind of mindset that you shouldn't be messing with what makes us human. So what was your view on that? And is it going to take a more, I don't know, maybe like profound cultural change to kind of push back really, really strongly at scale against that globally?
Well, I would say that all new technologies are very thought-provoking and often in a negative way initially. So think about Uber, right? You could take a safe, regulated taxi that you've been taking your whole life, or get in a stranger's car, right?
That's crazy.
It was crazy. It was an absolutely crazy idea back then. Airbnb is an even more extreme version of this, right? You can stay in a reputable, luxurious hotel, or you could literally stay in a stranger's house, a person you don't even know, right, that you met on the internet. Like, this is the kind of stuff you couldn't even make up beforehand. And you'd say, well, that's completely outrageous. Like, that's one of the reasons why Airbnb was basically an unfundable business at seed stage, because no one would believe that individuals would stay in strangers' homes. And so I think the same is true of enhancement. It's like, well, once you stay in an Airbnb and you realize, well, it's a lot nicer than staying in a hotel, you get a lot more space for less money, or you take an Uber and realize it's a lot more convenient than taking a taxi cab. The problem for transhumanism as a category is that there has been no tangible demonstration of transhumanism. Brian Johnson wants to be the longest living human being, but it's going to take 100 years to prove if he's correct. Versus for the enhanced games to prove that we're correct has already been done, right? We've broken a world record. We're going to break all the world records. It fits into a TikTok that gets viewed millions of times. Like, people can, one of the viral images on Instagram this week is of James Magnuson and his transformation from Olympian to enhanced superhero. And, read the comments on Instagram. People say, I want to look like that. What are the drugs? How do I get them? And we've taken, these amorphous intellectual academic concepts out of scientific journals and made them tangible bites for social media.
Can you share any details on what drugs or protocols James or Christian have been on?
Well, every athlete is entitled to their own medical privacy, and they work with their own doctors. And if they choose to disclose it, that's up to them. I don't talk about my protocols. I don't talk about the athlete's protocols. I can talk in general terms. And, a lot of people ask me about peptides or other like highly innovative compounds. I say no. The compounds that work fall into three categories. It's androgen anabolic steroids, it's synthetic growth hormones like testosterone, and it is EPO. These three compounds have been around for 100 years. The synthesis of testosterone was awarded the 1939 Nobel Prize. Like, this is Nobel Prize winning science that has been around for 100 years, that has been used by millions of people. 6% of men in Britain have used illegally procured injectable anabolic steroids. And the drug-on-drug interactions and the toxicologies are all very well known. And so the safety, the efficacy, and the delivery mechanisms are all very well documented and scientifically proven.
Have you taken any enhancements yourself?
Well, when journalists first asked me this question, I said, no, I haven't, because I'm a CEO, not an athlete. But actually, as I started to study the World Anti-Doping Agency's list of banned substances and procedures, I had realized that I had taken lots of banned substances. And I'll just give you one example. So I suffer from jet lag pretty bad, and one consequence of being a CEO is that I fly a lot. I would go to Harrods in London, the fancy department store, and they have an IV drip clinic. And I would get an IV infusion every time I came back to London after a long haul flight. And it turns out that getting an IV infusion, I believe, of more than 100 milliliters is a banned procedure under the World Anti-Doping Code because it's supposedly a masking agent. And I will tell you that an IV drip with a vitamin infusion is the best thing you can do to boost your recovery. That's how farcical the system is.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I think there are many enhancements that you might find useful as a CEO, even if you're not an athlete, and even doing something like raising your testosterone, you might find that it can have a lot of impact on your day-to-day performance and energy levels and drive and all of those things.
Exactly. I believe in scientific progress, right? And I'm willing to try and experiment. And it's, been a wonderful process. Sometimes I think, given what we achieved in the last 2 years to, lead a global conversation, I think the lead story on the New York Times sports page this morning, do I need any more enhancing? Because we've done so much, but there's always more, right? There is always more for us to do, and going back to the point about science fiction to scientific reality taking about 50 years. I think that time is compressing because remember, it took 110 years to go from Jules Verne to Neil Armstrong. And in the same way, I believe that, it's not going to take 50 years to get from, enhanced games to X-Men. And I'm very proud of the fact I'm 40 years old. So, even if human lifespans don't increase, hopefully I will get to see a world in which we've been able to birth true, demonstrable superhumanity, and really reimagine what is possible for our species.
Well, I really hope we do that. So talking about tying the long-term vision to action right now, what is the plan for Enhanced Games in the next 12 months? I think you guys are hosting the first event next year. Is that right? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's going to be in Las Vegas, Memorial Day weekend 2026, so about a year from today. It's going to involve 3 sports: track, swimming, and weightlifting. And at the Resorts World facility, 3,500 hotel rooms, 250,000 square feet of conferencing space, and 86 acres of land. The beauty about that is that everything we need is in one campus. So you don't need to get on a bus. There's no complicated transportation logistics. And, we intend to break the majority of significant world records there. We have millions and millions of dollars in prize money up for grab, and it's going to be a world-changing event. How can people get involved? I'm very open. My email address is Aron, ARON, @enhance.com. If you want to get involved in any way, shape, or form, send me an email. I literally respond to every single email that I get. I read every single one. I get thousands of emails every week from fans, from athletes, from broadcasters, from media. If you want to be involved in any way, shape, or form, just send me an email.
Well, you did respond to mine, so I'm pretty glad about that.
Well,
And
and one thing that I've learned, I've worked with some of the most successful people in the world for more than 20 years now. I have probably met more than half of the world's billionaires. And what I find is that the most successful people in the world are extremely responsive, right? If you email Peter Thiel, he's going to respond to you same day, no doubt, right? If you text him, he'll respond to you in minutes. And he just, Elon does the same thing, Sam does the same thing. And, this is a really important skill, responsiveness, and knowing that, we care about our fans, we care about our community, and amazing ideas and opportunities come from everywhere. So I invite the world to be in touch, aron@enhance.com. Add me on Instagram, Aron D'Souza, and I'll respond to you.
so talking about advice for founders and entrepreneurs, you mentioned be responsive. You mentioned make yourself useful and focus on what you can offer. What other advice would you give aspiring entrepreneurs?
There's all sorts of different kinds of entrepreneurship. Some people just want to be a lifestyle entrepreneur, have a business that makes them $1 million a year in passive income so that they can sit on a beach in Bali. But I'm the kind of entrepreneur that wants to change the world, and not in some kind of amorphous way, in an extremely tangible way, and lead the world into its next age. From the 9th age, the information age, into the 10th age, the enhanced age. And what advice would I give? It's, well, only 3 things matter. Number 1, can you attract not good people, not even great people, but the very best people in the world to work for you? And the measure we use is we want to recruit talent that could otherwise go work at Goldman Sachs or Citadel or OpenAI to come work at the Enhanced Games. And why will they do that? Is because of a compelling mission, right? No one is going to put product manager at Microsoft on their tombstone. Lots of people will put the Enhanced Cross. So number 1 is about attracting extraordinary talent. Number 2 is about retaining extraordinary talent. This is the easy one of the 3, because that's about a equity structure and a compensation structure that makes it financially sustainable and attractive for talent to remain. And then number 3 is the tough one, the toughest one by far, which is building a culture of excellence that enables all these all-stars to work together. And I use the example of football. If you want to have fun playing football, you will build a team of just your friends, and you will have a great time, and you will go out for beers after your Saturday matches, and you will have a very enjoyable time. If you want to win a championship, you have to get the best defender, you have to get the best center, you've got to get the best coach, you've got to get the best physiotherapist, and you then, as captain or as coach or as owner, you have to make these extraordinary people with these huge personalities work together. And that's very, very hard. And, when you see this in, the New York Yankees, in Manchester United, in real super high performing teams, it's magic, but it's really, really difficult. And that's a skill that very few people have in this world, and can only come from, I believe, a lot of experience and a lot of failures along the way.
Well, I think you're definitely right that participating in building the next era of humanity is definitely much more exciting to put on your CV or even invest in than like the 500 million of B2B SaaS.
Yeah, no, it's like, why would anyone want to work at like DocuSign or some like enterprise SaaS company when you can work to build the next instantiation of humanity? And that's why, Elon Musk will always say that Tesla is undervalued, despite the fact that all the banks have said for a decade that Tesla is overvalued. And he will say that it's undervalued for one reason and one reason alone, which is that Tesla is the number 1 choice of employer of engineers of any company in the world. SpaceX is number 2. And the reason SpaceX is number 2 is that you have to be a US citizen for security clearance reasons. And given that, they're able to solve any technological challenge. That's why they can make a rocket that lands itself, or, advanced robotics or self-driving cars. Mercedes, a very prestigious brand, could not build self-driving cars. They couldn't even build EVs. And now, Tesla is more valuable than almost every other car company in the world put together. And that's the level of talent density that we aspire to. We recruit the best athletes in the world record breakers, and we do the same at our internal operating team. So if anyone's listening out here and they think they're the best in the world and that they can come to Enhance and solve real problems for us, send me an email.
Sounds good. And now I'm curious, actually, has it been easier or has it been harder than you expected to build Enhance and get to where you are now?
It's been much easier than I've ever expected because of the reasons I've outlined. If we can recruit the best people in the world, we can break all the world records, we can build an extraordinary media product, we can sell pharmaceuticals, right? And it's all about just finding that small group of very talented people who believe that this is the mission of their life and are unbelievably dedicated to achieving this mission. Right, because this mission matters. It truly matters. And if I am like 90 or 100 years old and I go to my grave dying in an old, debilitated, feeble body, that will be a failure on me, right? Because I have the opportunity. I, Aron D'Souza, have the opportunity to solve that problem. Yes, I'm not going to invent the science behind it, but I'm going to create the economic and cultural conditions that mean that aging is a disease that we can treat, cure, and eventually solve. And if I don't do it, it is a moral failing on my part. And I believe that everyone who's part of my team recognizes that because it's so obvious that we have this opportunity in front of us.
We're almost at the end, but maybe I'm just going to ask you one or two quick questions before we finish. So talking about it being easier than you thought, what was your biggest, shit, this is not going to work moment so far in this journey, if any?
I always say when I meet investors, I'm not a 22-year-old kid out of Y Combinator. I'm a 40-year-old entrepreneur. I've built 10 companies. I've had 3 successful exits. Prior to this, I led Peter Thiel's litigation against Gawker Media, which is the subject of a book by New York Times bestselling author Ryan Holiday, Netflix documentary, right? Nothing phases me. Nothing stresses me. We could grow our revenues 10x tomorrow and it wouldn't stress me. Well, if we need to hire 100 more people, it wouldn't stress me because part of the maturity of experience is seeing problems, expecting them in advance. When World Aquatics brought out their new policy banning athletes, I was like, oh, this is not a problem. I had already written our response. I had already briefed the lawyers. I had already known the correct pathways. I had already known, I'd read the Sherman Antitrust Act end to end, and I knew what we needed to do, right? Because I anticipated and I expected that problem, right? And that's only something that can come from a lot of experience of fighting battles.
Well, you definitely like to be prepared, and your CV is definitely not the usual YC founder, like you said. Has it actually been a plus, or has it been a minus when you're raising money and when you're presenting this idea?
My CV has been a plus, of course, right? People look at, saying, there are very, very few people in this world who have had multiple exits who want to go back and build a company, right? Because building a company is literally the toughest thing you can do. It's an all-engrossing 24/7 job in a highly competitive environment. And why is Elon Musk the richest man in the world? Because he's built 5 unicorns back to back. You would think after exiting PayPal, pocketing, I believe, $140 million, he would just retire, right? Take the easy life, right? But no, he risked it all, went back again, and built SpaceX, risked it all again to build Tesla, right? Risked it all to build, leverage himself to the hilt to buy Twitter, right? And that's why he very deservedly is the richest man in the world, and has made a greater impact on human history than basically anyone else. He's going to be a Caesar-like figure in human history versus, most entrepreneurs, if they're lucky, will be a footnote. That's a rare set of skills, right? I find, I'm an investor too. I find very few founders who have had a successful exit who are willing to get straight back on the treadmill. And, I think, I'm 40 now. Enhanced, I'll probably be in the CEO seat for another 10 years. I already have my next ventures conceptualized. I've written a little bit about them, but, I question myself, is this what I'm going to do forever? Or should I actually just take a break and, enjoy my beautiful houses and, my family life and, relax a little bit? But no, when you have a mission that is so compelling, to upgrade humanity, then you're morally justified, you're morally obligated to act.
Well, Elon definitely likes the pain, and I suppose so do you. And the mission is definitely worth it. We're all rooting for you. This has been great, Aron. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to share with the audience? Any parting thoughts?
I would say that miracles happen more often than we expect, not because there is magic in the world, but because our dreams are too small. And when we raise our expectations, miracles happen. They happen frequently. And so if you are an individual who has been blessed with talent, with wealth, with capability, you have a moral obligation to lead a consequential life. Because only because talented people desire to act do we have human civilization, right? If we all just said, let's sit on the beach and relax, we would not have human civilization. We would just, we would have never crossed oceans. We would have never climbed mountains. We would have never gone to space. We would have never desired to enhance ourselves. And so if you are a person of talent, you have a moral obligation to lead a consequential life.
You have an obligation to lead a consequential life, and you have an obligation to act. And that's a great way to end. Thank you, Aron.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.